You guys remember Kodak, right? Did you know back in the 70s, Kodak, way back in the 70s, that's way back in the 70s, back in the dark ages, literally, there was not light in my eyes because I was not born yet. 70s. The 70s, Kodak was number 64 on the Fortune 500 list. Kodak. Where's Kodak today? Gone, right? Remember, they used to be everywhere. Remember signs like this? Like all over Disney, all over like all these places. You'd go to Yosemite or you go to anywhere, really. You go to the Everglades down here and there'd be a little sign that says, this is a Kodak moment, right? Like Kodak was everywhere, right? They were unstoppable. They were one of the great American companies. They could not be stopped. But what stopped them? Technology, right? Technology, like the digital camera, right? Now let me ask you something though. Who invented the digital camera? Does anyone know? Kodak did. Kodak invented the digital camera. That's the first digital camera. Kodak invented the digital camera. Now, do we still take pictures? Yeah. We take a lot of pictures. And I imagine most of you, like I imagine there's more cameras in this room right now than there would have been 15 years ago. Probably more than there would have been 7 years ago, right? I have one right here. Almost dropped it. I have one right here. And I'm changing slides because this thing controls my slides. I can actually see on this thing, I can actually see the slide that's coming up. That's why I turn that on sometimes. We have cameras over there. Now, here's the interesting thing. Now, I'm not sure right now, but iPhones, Apple makes the iPhone. I'm 80% certain that the new iPhones have a Sony camera chip in them. All right? The Apple doesn't make the actual camera chip. They make all the lenses and all that stuff, but the actual chip, I'm pretty sure Sony makes that. All right? Why didn't Kodak make it? Kodak made the digital camera. Listen, Kodak is very close to me. Kodak put a lot of food on my table growing up. My dad was a professional photographer. He did commercial advertising photography all the way up to about 10 years ago when the recession hit and it kind of ended that. But it's about, he was a professional photographer, so Kodak did all this. And I can remember when the digital stuff started happening, my dad started getting clients starting asking for it because it was cheaper, faster, and all that stuff. And quality wasn't quite there. And I remember my dad having a conversation. He's just like, but the quality is always going to be better with film. like that's hilarious, right? So that iPhone, let's talk about that for a second. That iPhone that you got in your pocket, have you seen the pictures that thing takes now? Now, imagine with your little $100 point and shoot that you used to carry around, which one looks better, right? Like that's sure, maybe if you had a $30,000 camera, right? But what I'm saying is Kodak invented the digital camera. They knew the way forward. They saw it. They saw that it was coming, and they went, nope, we're in film. We're not in imaging. You see that? Like sometimes when you see the road ahead, sometimes we have to change, right? We have to change who we are, what we do. We have to change in order to continue moving forward, or we'll end up like Kodak. Think about Sears. You realize Sears was basically Amazon, right? Like that was the whole catalog. The catalog thing, they would mail stuff. They would mail a house to your house, right? Like I have a friend that in D.C., he lived in D.C., he lived in a Sears house. He lived in one of those. That blows my mind, right? Like that's because, I grew up in the 80s, right? And that's just all that stuff. Like that blows my mind. Like Sears was Amazon. And now they're going out of business because of Amazon. It's amazing that we see this ebb and flow of all these things, all these companies. But I think the big one's Kodak. Kodak had the technology, and they decided to not do anything with it. In fact, they tried to squelch it and make it go away. Yeah, whoops. Which is hilarious. And again, I stress, this camera right here that I have in this phone, I also have a camera on this thing. Imagine if they, rather than switched to digital, and they were now providing picture chips to all these phones. But they're like, no, we're film. I thought of this example when I read, and I think finally understood, Luke chapter 16. Because I think Luke chapter 16 is about change. It's about change and the need to do it, and the need for that change. So, let's talk about this. Let's talk about Luke chapter 16, because this is difficult. And when you're reading the Bible, have you ever been reading the Bible and you're reading it and you get to something and you're like, boy, that's strange, right? Like, ooh, that's weird. Like, I don't know what to do with that. Here's my rule of thumb for you when you get to one of those things. Let it be weird. Let it be weird. It's weird for a reason. Let the scriptures be weird. Like, you read that and you're like, gosh, that's strange. Like, why is it doing that? Let it be weird. And while you're letting it be weird, let yourself just find out why it's weird. Because first off, let's actually talk about what's going on here. Remember last week, we talked about the parable of the lost things. The lost sheep, lost coin, and the lost son. And remember, with the lost son, we had this, it was this parable where the son wanted the father dead and all that stuff, basically, got his inheritance, wasted it all, came back with nothing, and then the father's like, you're back alive, that's amazing. Put a ring on his finger, throw this massive raging party for him, right? And so he throws this huge party, but who was outside of the party but the older brother? Like, Dad, I'm not happy that you're doing this. You already wasted all this money on this guy, on this son of yours, and all of that. And he's like, you didn't even let me enjoy what we had when it was just us. I've always been here, Dad. And the father looks at him and goes, son, I've always been with you. And everything I have is yours. This is what I want you to see. We have the end of that story where the son is left outside with a choice to make. Is he going to come into the party or is he not? But here's what I want you to see. A lot of times when we think about the end of a chapter of a book of Bible, we kind of end the thought. But here's what I want you to see. Here's the end of chapter 15 and then the first verse of 16. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for this your brother was dead and is alive. He's lost and he is found. He also said this to his disciples. There was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was wasting his possessions. You see that? There's not a break, is there? It just keeps on going. A lot of times when I would read the Bible, I would stop at a chapter. It's like, well, that's good for today. And then I would pick it up the next day. I'm like, oh, look at this completely new thought. Like, no. It just moves on. So this next little bit is connected to that story of the lost son, to the lost things. And this story is weird because this is what it's about. It's about this rich man who has this manager who's watching over his estate. And this rich man finds out that this manager isn't doing good things. And he comes up to him and is like, hey, you're stealing from me or something like that. It doesn't say what he's doing wrong, but you're doing a bad job. You're fired. You're done. I'm done with you. And do you know what that manager does? Right? Lois during Sunday school today said, well, today we would lock them all out of accounts and kick them out of the building, right? Well, that doesn't happen here. This guy sees that he's fired and he goes, oh, okay. And he goes to all of the debtors, all the people that owe the rich man money and are like, hey, Hank, you owe him 1,000 bushels of barley, right? Yeah, would you like to owe 800? Cool. All right, it's like, hey, Dale, you owe the rich man over here, you owe him like a ton of wheat, right? You owe him like 500 bushels of wheat. How about 300? How does that sound to you? Like, and he does that multiple times. Now, in your mind, what should we think of that guy? Good or bad? Everyone's like, we just like bad. That's right. It is, right? It's bad. Like that's like if you were the rich man and someone did that, you wouldn't go, oh, hey, good job there, fella. Like you just took money from me. I'm so proud of you, right? Like none of us would do that. None of us do that. Do you know what Jesus says? He says that the rich man goes over and goes, great job. This is wonderful. You're doing such a good job. That's weird, right? That doesn't make any sense. Like it doesn't make any sense at all. So what is this about? I mean, what are we supposed to do with this? Are we supposed to go, well, what are you saying, Jesus? It's like, am I supposed to, like, when I work for Visa, and should I get a job at Visa and just lower people's credit card debts down? Should I do that? Like, is that what you're telling me to do, Jesus? Like, you know, am I when I work somewhere and someone has a final bill, I'm supposed to just lower it, you know, like, and I'll be rewarded then? Is that what I'm supposed to do, Jesus? It's weird, right? Because and so what we see is we have to look at the story through biblical glasses. We have to look at it through biblical glasses. We have to look at it theologically. And that's what's difficult sometimes. That's what's difficult. So, and he says some weird things in the middle there, stuff about the Pharisees and how they're lovers of money and all that stuff. But we want to get to the meat of the story. We want to get to what's actually going on. And it's the story of the rich man and Lazarus. The rich man and Lazarus. Are you guys all pretty much familiar with this story before? Like it's kind of one of the more famous ones. It's basically what happens is this rich man, he goes up to he's living this life of just posh excess. You know, it says that he eats sumptuously. He eats to excess all the time, just over and over and over again. Just imagine like, you know, if we went out to eat, imagine if we went out to Cheddar's after this, like all of us together, and you're watching me eat, and I just take my Diet Coke, or my beer, let's do even beer. I do my beer, and German lemonade, right? And I do the beer, and I just go straight for it, and it's just going all over my cheeks and over, and then I'm like mid-swallow, and I'm just grabbing for like cheese sticks, and just jamming them in, you know, and and just eat, and you're like, oh my gosh, what is this guy, right? Like I think that's the image that they want, that this is what he's eating sumptuously, like just a lot, to the point it's like, oh my goodness. And right outside his door is this beggar named Lazarus. Now, right outside your door means when you have to walk out, you have to walk out over, right? It's like, oh, hello, Lazarus. You know, like all that stuff. Like that's what we have to do to get out, you know, to get past Lazarus. And Lazarus longed to eat the scraps that were falling off of the rich man's table, right? Long to drink the beer that's just flowing, the German lemonade, I mean, that's coming straight off of him from all that excess. He longed to eat just that. And to put worse and worse, dogs were coming up and licking his sores, right? And that's not like what you see on Facebook with like there's like a puppy attacking like a human and like licking them and stuff like that. No. It's like the bad way of looking at it, right? That you're so poor and destitute that you can't even shoo the dogs away from licking on you and stuff like that. It's not good. It's not good at all. So these two die. And it says that Lazarus goes straight to Abraham's bosom. Goes straight to Abraham's bosom, which is like the good place. Hooray! right? And then the rich man dies and is buried. He has a funeral. He's buried and goes straight to the bad place, down to Hades, where he's tormented in fire. And that's kind of what this picture is of this right there. And here's what's interesting. This story is always interesting. A lot of people, when they look at this, they first look at it and they're like, well, right there, Jesus telling a story. This is evidence for heaven and hell. It's not what this is about, okay? It's not what this is about. That's looking at this story, making it answer questions that it's not asking, okay? And what we have to do is we have to look at this story through biblical lens, through the eyes of the Bible, eyes for the Scripture, and see what it's telling us. Okay? What it is telling us. So we got to quit looking at it like we are 2019 Americans, right? That live in South Florida. And it's beautiful here and nasty everywhere else in the country, right? We got to quit looking at it and look at it through biblical lenses. And I'm going to try to help you with that today. So this rich man down in torment in Hades, fire all around him, looks up and he can see Abraham and he can see Lazarus. And he says to him, Abraham, tell Lazarus to come down here and dip his hand in cool water and so that it can drip onto my tongue because I am so much in torment from the flames all around. Now, let's have a conversation because we talked about this in Sunday school earlier and people disagreed with me during this point. That's fine. You have every right to be wrong, right? Just kidding. Just kidding. I read 3 commentaries about all this. All 3 of them disagreed with one another, okay? My friend Mark, who I write sermons with, he read stuff. And we worked hard. He and I had like this fight over what this meant today, right? So I'm going to give you my perspective on it. I think my perspective is right, but it might be wrong. But it's not. All right? But if you disagree with it, that's fine. That's what this is all about. It's all about, okay? I think it's odd what the rich man is asking for there. He's like, Abraham, ask Lazarus to come down and cool off my tongue. What does that sound like? Like some said in Sunday school today, that sounds like begging, and you're kind of right. You're kind of right. Like he's begging that he wants to turn his life around and all that stuff. But I don't think he does. I still think he's thinking just like he used to think. Abraham, tell Lazarus to continue to be beneath me and give me the things that I need. My tongue is hot and I need water to cool it down. Interesting, huh? And that's what's interesting about this. Remember that older son that was standing outside of the party, and we were faced with a question of who is he going to go in or is he not? And then all of a sudden we see this guy again faced with a question. He sees where his lifestyle has gotten him. After all, Abraham says, "Hey, in your life, rich man, you got all your good things. Now Lazarus is getting good things, and you are in torment." Like he's saying, and he's seeing where his life is and where it has led to, and where he's at, and we can tell that he needs to make a change. He's like Kodak, right? Kodak saw the digital revolution coming and went, no, it's film. And Kodak doesn't exist anymore. And this rich man, he sees that he is in torment from his lifestyle. He sees that he's in torment from his lifestyle and is refusing to see it. And I think he's still bossing Lazarus around, or at least trying to. And he won't, because he won't give it up. even after Abraham says, man, there's this huge chasm. It's the Grand Canyon between you and I, right? No one can go across it. And he's like, oh, okay, well then send Lazarus to my friends and family. Send Lazarus to my family. I have 5 brothers. Tell them. And he's like, no one's going to listen to him. And he's like, if someone rises from the dead, someone will listen to him. We'll get to that in a second. What I think is interesting about this is that even in the fire of Hades, he refuses to change. In college, I took a class on the book Paradise Lost. Has anyone read Paradise Lost? Nobody? Glenn. Long distance 5, Glenn. Like that. And that's, oh, you got one over here? Yeah. Did anyone read Paradise Lost and understand it? Like that? I can't say like that. That's why I took a class on it. You know, Paradise Lost, it's Milton. It's poetry from like 600 years ago. 700 years ago. And so, but you know how Adam and Eve, we think Adam and Eve ate an apple? That's from Paradise Lost. They ate a fruit in the Bible. Apple is from Paradise Lost. But one of the things about Paradise Lost is that it's at the beginning of the book when Satan and all of his cronies get kicked out of heaven. Satan's rallying cry to all of the demons is, it's better to reign in hell than to serve in heaven. You've heard that before, right? That's Paradise Lost. Good literature. And so, but that's, when I was reading about this rich man, I was like, ooh, that's him. It's better to reign in Hades, bossing people around, than to ever be a servant in heaven. That's so antithetical to everything that's going on in the gospel. That's so opposite to what everything's going on in what Jesus would have there, right? So, we see that Lazarus here, we see that the rich man says, hey, if you could just send someone back, if you could just send them back, they'll believe someone that rises from the dead, right? You know, because when you're watching Walking Dead, no one watches Walking Dead anymore because it's a terrible, terrible show now. You know, back 10 years ago when you were watching Walking Dead and it was good, you guys know what I'm talking about, right? Like 4 of you. Appreciate that, Cindy. You're one of the 4. You know, when you're watching a zombie movie and someone comes back to dead and they start telling you about Jesus, you listen to them, right? He rises, he goes, if someone rises again from the dead, then someone will believe him. And Jesus, well, Abraham in the parable, but Jesus says, if they do not hear Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced if someone should rise from the dead. Even if someone hears Moses and the prophets, they won't be convinced even though someone comes from the dead. It seems like they can't change, right? Like when I was growing up, like understanding this parable, this seemed really harsh and weird about this rich man. Like he walked over Lazarus, this poor guy, his whole life, right? And Lazarus longed just to eat what was falling off of his table. And now they both die, and the rich man is in torment. And he can't imagine if someone would serve, that he would serve someone even though he's in torment anymore. This reminds me of the Pharisees. I think this is all about the Pharisees. That's what all this is about. These religious leaders of the day. That Israel itself has been charged to be faithful, and they've been completely unfaithful. They have failed to bless the poor and the needy. They have failed to listen to the way of God, and they have missed the point. And Jesus is saying that even if someone comes back from the dead to warn them, they still won't change. It's just like Kodak, and it's just like you and me, right? Listen, I grew up with a faith that said, You got to know what you're talking about because you may be able to convince someone of what you believe. So we need to read these books, we need to be good at apologetics. We need to hand out cases of Case for Christ to everyone, right? We need to hand all these things out so that we can convince these people that Jesus came back to life and then they will believe. If they do not hear the Moses and the prophet, if they don't hear about the stuff they already have, then neither will be convinced if someone even rises from the dead. Like I grew up, like the point of Christianity was to convince people that Jesus rose back from the dead and you should believe him now. That evangelism was this sense of like, you have to believe all this stuff in order to go to the good place or something like that. We do all these things that we would convince people of all this stuff. And yet Jesus at the end of Luke chapter 16, not 15:7, Luke chapter 16, that he is saying, listen, they got everything they need. Nothing's going to convince them, even if someone should die and rise again. Why is Jesus saying this? Why? Why is Jesus saying this? And I'm serious. Why is Jesus saying this? Because, Jesus knows what he's doing. He's already talked twice about how he was going to die at the hands of the religious leaders and the people and then rise again. He's already said that twice in Luke. He knows he's talking about himself rising again. Why is he saying this, that it's not going to convince anybody? Why is he saying that? Why is Jesus going to the cross? Why is Jesus going to Why is Jesus going to die and rise if it's not going to change anyone's mind? Why? What's the purpose? If Christianity is about just changing minds, and Jesus says that's a futile thing, then why is he doing it? I think he's doing it. And it shows us at the end of Luke. Luke chapter 24. Because have you guys ever thought about this question? Why? Why is Jesus saying it's not going to change anyone's mind, but he's obviously talking about what he's going to do? It seems pointless, doesn't it? So, we go to Luke chapter 24. It's called the Road to Emmaus. And we'll get into this in about 5 weeks, more in-depthly. But the road to Emmaus is these two people walking down this road, and all of a sudden, Jesus appears. Now, Jesus has died on the cross, and he's risen again. And he kind of catches up to him. It's kind of a weird story. And he catches up to him. He's like, hey, what are you guys talking about? And they're like, well, we were talking about, don't you know about all this stuff that happened? This guy named Jesus, he died. He didn't do anything wrong. And they killed him. And he's like, oh, that's interesting. And he starts explaining something to them. And beginning with Moses and the prophets, he interpreted to them all the scriptures, the things concerning himself. Do you see the connection? He goes back to Moses and the prophets. He goes back to the original Bible, and he explains how it's all about him. And they still don't quite understand. They're like, oh, that's cool. And they're like, hey, that was really cool stories you were telling us there. What's your name again? Like, I don't remember. Do you want to come in for dinner? And he's like, yeah, I'll come in for dinner. And they're eating dinner. And then about halfway through the dinner, Jesus stands up, grabs hold of the bread, lifts it up, breaks it, blesses it. Does that sound familiar? I'm standing over here for a reason. Does that sound familiar? Sounds like communion, right? And these people, what happens to them? All of a sudden they're like, oh, they recognize him, like, it's Jesus, he's alive, and he disappears. Super weird story. And he disappears. But I think we get what we're actually supposed to see there. What we're actually supposed to see is why Jesus is saying that it's not about changing minds. The reason why Jesus is coming to die and rise again is not to change your puny, pathetic little mind or my pathetic little mind. It's that he will rise up being King of kings and Lord of lords, that he will rise up coming to redeem the unredeemable, coming to bring life to the dead, coming to bring hope to the hopeless, that he is the one that will lift him up. And it's not because you decided, oh, I'll just follow Jesus today. He's like, no, you're coming with me now. And he grabs you and he's pulling you, maybe kicking and screaming, because he's going to redeem you because he rose from the dead. That's what he's doing. And when I look at that, and I look at it, I'm like, oh, this isn't just about me. This is about God's love for me, even when I'm being pretty pathetic. And that it's not about me to change, but it's about how God is coming to save me. And you know what? That's good news.